Thank you for joining us for this Inside the Investigation feature, part of our latest project, Dead and Undone. I'm Josh Hinkle, joined by my colleague and fellow investigator, David Barrera. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So I just want to talk a little bit about what got us started with this project. Um, you know, it really kind of began with research as we were looking at other things related to protests over racial injustice and police brutality that were happening in Texas and across the nation this past spring and summer, right?
Yeah, I think it started with seeing the protests going on in Austin and nationwide about people dying in police custody, and we knew from previous investigations that there was a big database of information on custodial deaths in Texas that the Attorney General's office had. And so we tapped into that and data that we got from the Texas Justice Initiative to start to look into any issues that we could find with in custody deaths and with that data.
And that's really where you started seeing discrepancies like the late custodial death reports that were filed and some that were still incomplete after years. One of the big things that's happened during the time that we have been putting this investigation together is clearly the coronavirus pandemic has continued playing out in Texas and across the world. It made things very difficult and challenging for us gathering information for this. Not just the interviews, like we had to conduct most of our interviews on Zoom, like we're talking to each other right now. But I know that it also made things challenging gathering data and records and things you would need to verify what we were hearing from people from the law enforcement agencies themselves.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we're able to go to the courthouse and get records or meet with people, meet with sources and victims and make victims' families too. And we weren't, able to meet with anyone. We can't go to the courthouse to get records. Everything has to be done through basically online through requests and through the phone. So that made it pretty tough to do an investigation because we can't do it like we normally could. And in other investigations, we've traveled, we've gone and seen people, done interviews at people's houses, and that just isn't possible right now.
And it was also challenging because some agencies have been granted, you know, the leeway to maybe hold on to records that we might need a little longer too in Texas because of the pandemic.
Yeah, there have been cases of government agencies and police departments, law enforcement departments using exceptions to the open records law because of the pandemic, because of short staffing or skeleton crews to be able to not provide records as quickly as normal.
When we're also talking about the coronavirus, we found some interesting things that have popped up possibly because of it during 2020, specifically in the data we were seeing with agencies like the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, which is the agency that is responsible for all of the prisons in the state. What were you finding there?
Yeah, the TDCJ runs all the prisons, and they have a huge population of people and that are there for a long period of time. So they normally, I believe, account for most of the in custody deaths, just because of the way that their population exists. But they've been hit pretty hard with coronavirus. They've had a lot of cases, and we found that the number of reports that were not filed correctly by that department's inspector general really ballooned in over the summer and during coronavirus.
And that's something that they've told us that they're working to get on top of because they understand that transparency is important, obviously, and they want to make that correction.
Yeah, I spoke with a general counsel at the inspector general's office, and he said that there was an issue with one employee that led to a bit of a backlog, and that's been solved. But they have struggled um, during the pandemic to get all the records filed on time.
The legislative session starts in January 2021, which is just a few months from while we're having this conversation. And I know that the coronavirus probably will be a big part of the discussions lawmakers will be having. But from what we're hearing, criminal justice reform, specifically transparency in criminal justice, will be something that's very top of mind. And that's partly because of the fact that it's in the national conversation right now, that there is so much focus on um, the way that police are behaving, possible brutality, and how it relates to things like race. Can you comment on kind of what we were seeing with this investigation specific to race?
Yeah, I think one of the lawmakers we talked to said he felt like criminal justice reform was in the air. A big part of that is the racial injustice and criminal justice problems in regards to race that have happened around the country. And in Austin too, we've had some high profile cases that have become sort of focusing events or caught the attention of everyone. And that's been a big part of our research and what led us down this path of looking into these reports. The NAACP's findings found that there is a disproportionate number of people of Black people in America that are affected by police brutality, I think is the term they used. And the data that we found in the Attorney General's data shows that compared to their percent of the population in the state, that Black people have represent a disproportionate number of the custodial deaths.
And I think that if we had a better understanding of the details of those deaths here in Texas, that would do a lot for transparency. And possibly Texas could continue being a model in this area of transparency, because many states don't have a way for the public to view custodial death reports online like the state of Texas does.
Yeah, and I think that was the point that the original lawmaker that created the law said, that that was a goal, was to create transparency, to create a data bank that you could look through to find any problems and patterns and try to fix issues like what we're talking about. And so that was a big focus of our reporting, was to make sure that the reporting is done correctly, and that any law enforcement agencies that don't follow the law are held accountable in some way, and that's not happening right now.
All right. Well, David, thanks for talking with me, and thanks for working with me on this project. Online now, Dead and Undone, the digital investigation. Watch the immersive video feature as we lay out the evidence in a Texas jail death and why the law has made it so difficult for the public to learn what happened. Explore the story and its interactive data components to see concerns with custodial death reports across the state. Plus, don't miss our weekly investigative podcast, Catalyst, as we take an even closer look at this issue and how lawmakers are addressing problems with police and transparency. It's all online now. Just go to deadincustody.com. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.